people doing streaming.
We have to wear a mic.
Yes. There's separate mics for the room, so that this one is the one that gets picked up by the camera.
Right, okay, yes.
Thank you.
So
where's John when you need him?
Exactly. So everybody's two of us.
Yeah.
Apart from the first presenter.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's all I'll just put it on.
Yeah. Perfect.
But I suppose I'll need to speak into it and introduce it. I don't need to introduce it, but that's fine.
You can just pick up from the room.
Yeah. No, I don't need to do that. But
I might just say stuff I'm not actually just picked up from there. So
okay.
we can do a quick test.
Testing. Shall I try speaking again, see how we got on? Brilliant. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes just to activate the here. Could you just let everyone know as well the sessions will be live streamed? Just to make you aware of that. So it will just be the backs of your head, so don't need to worry too much, but just to make you aware that it's being live streamed. Okay, I think we'll maybe start then. So this session is a hacking, making, sharing strand, just making sure everyone is in the right room. That's what we're expecting. And just for the people who have just arrived, the majority of the session is going to be streamed as well. So what we have this afternoon then is 4, potentially 5, if the other speaker makes themselves known, 15-minute sessions. And we will try our best to stick to times, make sure that we don't overlap with tea break. So we're actually due to finish at 3:30, so we'll probably get a bit of time for some extended chat as well. If sessions overrun slightly, we've got plenty of time. So we'll make a start then, and I'll ask our first speaker to come up, please. So this is a presentation by Paul Collins, but Paul is unable to join us this afternoon. So we have Yan, who is going to present on Paul's behalf. So I will hand over to you then.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, my colleague Paul Hollins couldn't make it, so I will present for him. In this presentation, I would like to share some of our work on stimulating the production of applied game as open educational resources from the REACH project. So the REACH project, realizing an applied gaming ecosystem, it's a 48 months technology and know-how driven research and innovation project co-funded by EU Framework Program for Research and Innovation on the Horizon 2020. And also it was launched on February 2015, included 20 key partners from the industry, the education sector, and the research center across Europe from 10 countries, including Australia, Italy, and the UK, and the Netherlands. So some background. So as we know, there are lots of research on the potential of digital game in education. turn this off?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. So we'll ask our next speaker to come up then, please.
Just to make you aware that we're streaming now and there's a mic there, but I think it's okay, it's been tested just to be left there if you'd rather do that.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll move on to our next speaker then. Our next presenter is Russell Boya, and he's going to talk about liberating open education through making controls. So we'll hear more about that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I'm Russell Boya from the University of Warwick, and I'm representing the Construit project, which is being led by my colleague Morag Bynan, who's unfortunately not able to make it today. They are having a project meeting in Greece, so it's quite a nice day here, so I think I got the better end of the deal. So what I want to talk about is what the Construit project is doing, and the Construit project is looking at the way in which we can make interactive resources, but make them in a way that is perhaps a little bit more open, in a way that I'll come on to talk about, but particularly in a way that can be remixed and reused in a way that means that they're not closed. But one of the challenges, I think, with any kind of interactive artifact, with any piece of software that we think about, is that there's a whole variety of challenges, of which I'm sure you're familiar with in terms of the legal and the copyright, the language in which they're created, their alignment to the curriculum, all these kind of issues. But the thing that I want to talk about, and the thing that the project is quite concerned about, is focusing on the digital skills and the knowledge necessary to reuse and to remix any kind of interactive artifact, whether that's a piece of software or some kind of interactive artifact. If we think about the kind of skills that are necessary then to both create a new resource, obviously you're going to need a piece of software, and that will either be something that's pretty general or something that's specialist, and then the appropriate digital skills, whatever they might be, to create that artifact. And usually that's something you're going to deliver these days on a multitude of platforms for different forms of use. So it'll either be on a desktop or mobile, interact with it in various different kind of ways. And then updating or revising that sort of perhaps many years later, you might need that recreation of that original software or the equivalent environment, the original setup. But perhaps most interestingly, what you might need is the skills and the awareness of what the original issues were to look again, or somebody else comes to look again at that thing that you've created. What was the content? What were the issues? How was it put together? So it becomes both a challenge of technical and of conceptual, and obviously in the technical sense, maintaining a bit of software to edit something, edit a resource many years later. I worked on a project that only 5 years after we created the original set of resources, it's already quite difficult for us to update and edit because of what seemed like a sensible choice at the time. You make these choices in terms of the technical aspects that at the time feel like wise choices. A few years later down the line can feel very unwise because the software that you've chosen doesn't run, because you're suddenly having to design for mobile, which you didn't think about sort of a few years previously, and the libraries and the tools that were available at the time were easy to use, then perhaps a little bit more difficult. So even making simple conceptual changes can be a bit of a challenge because the technical aspects sort of just get in the way. And even if you've got the skills and the software, it can be a bit of a barrier as time passes. And you can mitigate against that risk, but really when you start to think about more challenging conceptual changes to a resource, that's when the fun really begins, because it's not that I need the ability to edit that resource. I need to understand, well, how did the original author get there in the first place? What was their mindset? How did they put that resource together? What's the internal structure? How does it work? Can I pull it apart for my use? Can I bend it into a new form? Can I take what's there and fit it into what I'm doing right now? And I think what you tend to find is that resources that are published, they almost tend to be a kind of a reconstruction of somebody else's journey in developing that resource. So you can think about it as there's a journey through a valley which is described to you, but neglects all the sort of the dead ends that you went down, where you went down that path but it was the wrong one. That kind of reconstruction, it's an after-the-fact reconstruction rather than necessarily a complete record of the construction of that OER. So the Construit project is it's a multi-European country project that's funded by the EU Erasmus programme, and what the project is concerned about is developing open educational resources primarily aimed at schools, but developing these construals then, which might seem an unusual term, but I'll come on to talk about that in a second. But at a general level, they are fairly fluid and interactive resources. And they're the kind of things that you might find on the web, that there's some kind of small interactive game, some artifact that you can play with, that you can manipulate, that you can complete the circuit, you can find out where the beams of light are flowing through a light box, you can colour hexagons, or you can visualise what are the planets in the solar system. But construals are intended to be something a bit richer than that. And it comes back to the work of Michael Faraday, and more specifically the work of David Goodin, who sadly is no longer with us now, but he wrote a book about 20 years ago called Experiment and the Making of Meaning. If there was ever a case for open resources, I would say for that book alone, because you can't get it anymore. It's almost impossible to find it. But it is a very good book because David Goodin looked at the way in which Faraday and a number of other scientists tried to understand electromagnetism. And the specific physical aspects of it are not important, but really what Goodin was describing was the way in which each of those scientists evolved their understanding of the physical phenomena and slowly built up an understanding of what we now know as electromagnetism. But of course, at that point, they had no idea what it was or had no kind of conception of how it might be put together, and each of them is sort of piecing together parts of that puzzle. And the process of making construals then is concerned with constructing representations, in their case of physical phenomena, and articulating the different possibilities. So thinking through, well, what is this physical phenomena, and can we represent that in some way? And that for each of them, that will be a fairly personal, because personal kind of understanding as they're interpreting the physical aspects of what they see, making hypotheses, and trying to use their imagination to form a conceptual picture then of what, in their case, electromagnetism was. And if we kind of extend that concept into our case, the process that they were going through of understanding electromagnetism is the same kind of thing that I might do if I'm building a model or building an artifact or something. I'm trying to understand something, I'm trying to understand physical properties, or I'm trying to understand something that I might reference in the world, and then try and construct a model of that in the computer with the intention that I can use that to explain to somebody else, or that somebody else can learn from that. So one of the things the Construit project is doing is building an online environment in which you can build up these interactive artifacts. So I can build up an artifact that's a sort of a top-down view of a light box. So you've got a black box, there's a whole bunch of mirrors arranged in it in a way that you don't know, and the idea is that you shine a torchlight in and try and build up a picture of where the mirrors are and how they're angled. And that and many of the other models that have been built are designed to let you interact with them. So the ones I showed you a few minutes ago, that I can manipulate the circuit, the light box, I can colour, visualise the solar system. But really what they're there for is not just a simple artefact that's constructed just for that purpose, but they're built in an environment, but we could use anything. It's just a tool. We think we've put some features in there which make it amenable to building these kind of artifacts. But what we're doing is building controls, then building an artifact, building an environment which allows us to ask the what-if question. So rather than just visualising that solar system or just visualising that electrical circuit, we're trying to build these artifacts in a way that you can ask other kind of questions with them, or completely repurpose them for something completely unintended by the original author. And that you can use those to try and make sense of the situation. And those kind of interactive resources that are available, they're there to help you make sense of something. They're not there to just sort of let you experiment with one thing, but in the process of making sense of something, I can learn about the knowledge and the skills and the judgment of the different elements in each of those resources. So you can take a solar system model then, and this was just an OER that that somebody else had written, which is used for visualizing the solar system. But that's all it does, is that it visualizes the solar system, which is great if you want to visualize the solar system. But suppose you want to alter the gravitational constant, or you want to speed up the planets, or increase the radius of the orbital radius, or the luminosity of the sun, and see what kind of effects that has. If you wanted to try and take that original OER that existed, it's very difficult to do that. But what we're trying to do is build resources in a way that it isn't just optimized in a way then for the visualization, that some of the underlying principles, what kind of things can I observe, what's the connection between the mass of a planet, and the mass of this other planet, and the gravitational effects around it. So rather than it just being a reconstruction of somebody's understanding, the project is trying to create an environment, trying to create resources where it's a record, so you get a record of somebody's understanding of a solar system then as they've built up that kind of environment. And the work that David Gooding did of the scientists trying to understand electromagnetism, and some of the artifacts that are being built up for this project, they really are about the interaction between the kind of an interaction with the resource and the thinking that I do, and the way that all of that is tangled up in that I can't completely disentangle my interactions with the way that I learn or the mental model that I'm building up. But what I'm doing is building up a way of looking at the openness of a particular resource and building up the kind of way in which I can develop that understanding. And all of this is leading towards sort of treating sense-making, this sense-making of interacting with an artifact. What can I learn from an artifact? What kind of questions can I ask? Can I build a resource in which not only I can learn something, but I can pass that to somebody else? And it isn't just the end result of my kind of learning, but it is environment which they can ask questions in the same way that I have done the same. So that kind of exploration of in any of the resources, it means you can build something which is perhaps a bit more
do. And we were joining a conversation. You see, David had been thinking about this since how long, David?
About 10 years.
10 years. He'd been doing this with his class. Now, this is a passage from, can you tell us where it's from?
I can't see the screen.
Oh no, he can't see the screen. It's the one where you first put the letters in your blog post. So
it's from Haruki Murakami. Kami's 1Q84.
Yeah, it says up there, top line. So he put this, embedded it in a class blog post. Now, sometimes people go, it's fantastic, you have your students blogging, you're blogging, there's this online connection, that's so good. But then he did this and he said, wait, what is it? What are we doing? Is it what you mean? Is it not what you mean? And you might see that some of these letters are in different colors. And what actually it spelled out was find the jokers. Find the jokers. You've got some jokers. You can find the jokers. You don't have to scan the code yet, but find the jokers. So it was an invitation. It was asking the students, what are you going to do? And basically, on that blog post, they found the jokers, which were embedded in the classroom, because he was teaching high school students. So again, we've got high school, university level, all different coming together. And they then began to ask deeper questions rather than, can you read chapters 1 to 3 of Pride and Prejudice for next Friday? You know, it was deeper questions. How does this relate to my life? And what am I going to do with it? So 3 things began to underpin, well, what David did, then what we did, and wider projects. Value, interdependence, and hope. Now, you might think, wait a minute, hope, she's gone off the deep end. But no, anytime there's learning, and it has value for the learner, it gives us genuine optimism. We look forward to doing something with it, using it in our lives, that kind of hope. It's a genuine thing, and I think sometimes we lose sight of it. The interdependence has to do with co-learning, collaboration, and reaching beyond, the networks beyond. So it began, and these blog posts reached out, and there were some quite amazing things. I'm going to show you about 20 seconds of 2 videos, if I get to the right place. So we have, first, this is, come on thing, let's make it go from the right place. This is a video that David's students made. And it goes on, but it was about what it started to mean to them, to be able to take control of their learning, to be told actually it's beyond these 4 walls. You can do more. So then we get to one that's even more bonkers. The next year, before the class started, one of his students, looking forward to the, in America it's called AP, it's like college credit English, but in high school, she made a trailer for the English class. Oh my gosh! So if your 17-year-old student does this, so she goes on, and the exciting thing, you can see the QR codes, after they were embedded in the classroom the first time around, the students took control of this and turned the whole thing into a game. It became super fun. And with anything, once it starts to get going, you think, actually, this is pretty darn good. So when we were having our dreaming sessions, Jonathan, Mark, and I were joining something that had already begun. It's going to take it 3 seconds. And when you add anybody to the mix of a conversation, it changes and it grows. Another student decided that he was going to do a Kickstarter and raised, $20,000, $30,000 to have a tour across America, see what life is like. And now he's a professional documentary maker. And then, as we started going, things changed, things developed. And we thought, actually, there's the old-fashioned, read and write and arithmetic, but actually, we've got to think broader. If you think about the axiom that the jobs that are made for our students in 10 years, I have no idea what they're going to be. And the skills that the employers are looking for Yes, of course you have to be competent in your subject area. You need to know those core understandings, but the wider connection skills are so valuable. They really, really are. So anything can be an open source learning environment. We've seen some fantastic examples this morning of platforms that people have made and how they've been so valuable to people, and talking about what if you do want to do more than create the model of the solar system and all these different things. How are you going to be able to do everything? I can't do everything. Nobody can do everything. But if we can adopt some certain core principles, then actually many of the things that we do in everyday life and teaching already are embodying these things, and it's about getting it out there and sharing the practice and the things that we can do. So part of what the Open Source Learning Foundation does is it's inclusive across ages, across disciplines. Of course, we have a couple of music pictures because that's kind of me. But we had a project where I threw this out to my students, and they went to California off their own back and worked with all sorts of people, from community workshops in schools, workshops in the middle of the Yosemite National Forest, and it was great. Now, it doesn't have to be in the wild. This is a project by Jonathan Worth, and it's called Connecting Classes. Now, we've heard about connected learning, but connected learning can also be open source learning. And what he's done with this project is he does a teaching method where actually what you do is you may have a recorded interview with somebody, and the students listen to it as part of the class content. And so they may all bring their devices. In fact, they should bring their devices, two in fact, one to watch or listen, and the other to tweet with a hashtag like we've done today about OER. After the session, he gathers all the tweets, but it's not just for the students, it's for the whole world. And what this does, just like David's blog post at the beginning on one of those slides, his students started reaching out, and then the professionals in the industry start to comment and come back to you. And so suddenly you find you have access to the poet, actually that poet, not just some research about the poet. Yes, you need that, but also you might be able to ask the first-hand source. And so those things are so valuable. So with this project, Jonathan had always taught like that, but he said, wait a minute, sometimes in education we research things, we spread our good practice, and we formalize them. So he's running the first wave, I've taken a screenshot from his webpage, the alpha test and the beginning of things, and so I'm in the first wave. My class are going to be actually Friday at noon, listening to their first interview of Richard Crozier, who's a music publisher and teacher, and tweeting about it and reaching out. So after these things, the teachers are going to get together, and that's what's on your Joker card. It's an invitation to actually spread it further. What do you think about it? What do you think about the practice of teaching in these ways? What sort of learning methodologies do you use? How do you learn? How do you reach out? How do you network? You're in a conference. At this conference, have you made some connections that are valuable? And how have you done it? How do you spread that and teach other people? Can we open source the learning and teaching that is going on here now? So that takes you to a more formally written out invitation of that. And there we are. I'm conscious of time, and I can't see the clock on this, so I don't know what it is. Okay, so there we go. Poor David's been in California early in the morning, and I haven't let him say a single thing. Would you like to say anything, David?
Thank you, Laura. You hit all the high notes, and it's kind of fun being sort of the disembodied head of Oz over here. And unfortunately, I've got to actually go. But before I do, we have a knack in K through 12 and higher education for making policy around what we expect not to work. And so part of the appeal of open and connected is that it stands in happy opposition to what we assume is the dominant culture of education. One of the things that Laura and I and so many others, probably many of you, have realized is that there's magic in these connections. The Medici family in the Renaissance understood that when you put people together of different backgrounds and perspectives, value gets created. It might be financial, it might be cultural, it might be political, but something good is going to happen. The other thing I want to make comment on is that history is full of examples of individual teachers who have done wonderful things with students. that's not particularly unique, and it's not been particularly successful in creating the sort of sea change we all need to serve the next generation of learners. So what I'd like to suggest is that all of you find ways, and Laura and I have identified the foundation as one way, to create a tent, to create a field. We're not interested in mandating or standardizing the height and colors of the flowers. We believe that everyone has an ability to do these things in a way that benefits themselves and others. I heard Laura talk about how learning benefits us. Neuronal development makes us happy and staves off depression for starters. And one of the things that I see in schools too often is a great deal of depression, because school is the only place where learning is not interdisciplinary. So regardless of your background, regardless of the level of the students you teach, I'd love to invite you to join us in the conversation, because as Laura mentioned, when anyone joins a conversation, everything changes. And with that, and the fact that I know we want to leave time for some dialogue and questions, Laura, thanks so much for patching me in, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day.
Thank you. We can see you now. So yeah, finally. Yay.
And with that, I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, okay, see you. I'll hang up on you. Bye, David.
Bye.
There you go. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Laura and David.
Questions, if anyone has any questions for Laura? Maybe some of us will take up your invite. To
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
Instagram, one of those jokers, and maybe follow that up. Certainly sounds like a really interesting project. Yeah, hopefully we'll learn new people to the conversation. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're just going to swap this back now for our next speaker.
So just bear with me a wee second. And
I just wanted to check actually, because I'm not entirely sure if our next speakers here, or if Mark's going to come to the rescue for a bit for me. is look here. I'm not sure if here comes to okay, so we're going to get this here again. We're going to translate
I was going to go to doing that, but thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is our final speaker of this session then, last but not least. So Angeline is going to be talking to us about enriching a culture of openness, technology, open layer at the OU. So I'll hand over to Angela.
Okay, thank you very much. And now for something completely different. That's the first cultural reference of the presentation. Hope you know which one it is from, Monty Python's Flying Circus. You see, I'm presenting here, but our fellow presenters who are not here, Andrew Law and Patrick McAndrew, if we were different sex, we could be the Andrews sisters, but with second cultural reference. But I'm going to be talking about 10 years of Open Learn. 10 years are gone. What have 10 years done for me? Third cultural reference. Do you know who it's from? It's John Mayer and the Blues Breakers? Okay, no, that one went too far. I'll give up on the cultural references now. Let's just talk about what I was here to talk about. So, Open Learn from the Open University, which I expect many of you have heard about, will be 10 years old this year. Or is 10 years old this year. It started with a proposal. This is an institutional proposal, so this is a big thing where the university as a whole, the senior management of the university decided they want to get into this open educational resources, whatever's happening. It's seen what MIT had done, talking about it and being an open university with open in its name. It thought, there must be something in this. So there was a review. They decided they wanted to do a project, and they wanted it at a big scale. It didn't quite have the monies itself to put into it, so in discussions with the William and Flora Foundation, who said they'd be willing to fund something, we put forward a proposal. And this is a summary of what went to the William Flora Foundation in the first instance, and that just highlights some of the key points of it. So this is pump priming. We were asking for nearly $9 million from them. The university is putting in $1 million. There's about £5.5 million at that time. 2 years to get started. So this is to start something in 2 years. It's 2 years. We all know about 2-year projects, you know, get the funding, things like that. End of the time, that's it. It's gone. That was a good idea, but nothing. But the ambition from the first point was this was going to hopefully be long-lasting. This was a university initiative, institutional initiative. This was not to do it. This was to be doing the pump priming. And in particular, you see in there, we said there'd be a stage 3. So we talked about a stage 1 and stage 2 in the proposal, but there'd be a stage 3 when open content provision will be fully embedded within the Open University systems and processes. So there was that commitment saying, no, we want the money to get started, but we're proposing to go further. And this proposal contained a logic model. I don't expect to see the details of that, so I just highlight those. The final column, the ultimate outcome. So this is beyond the year of N2. So this is the 4 things that we said in that proposal we're going to do. Ongoing contribution, development, supported open content, increasing success and extending participation in HE. You can read those there. So I'll be coming back to those and saying how I think we've fared against those 4. Because we have been going 10 years, we still are going 10 years. It is happening, it's still embedded. To a certain extent, so we have done what we said in that stage 3, that we have gone through with that stage. But what happened next? Of course, many things have happened over those 10 years. This just picks out a few things which happened in there in terms of launching Open Learn. We had the first Open Learn conference, one and only Open Learn conference as it happened, to funding. The university also at that time, because of other things, got into launching an iTunes U and a YouTube channels. But in 2008, after the first 2 years, an evaluation of it, the university said, yeah, we'll keep it going. We think it's done well. We had Open Learn research report. The Open Media Unit is formed. That's important because I didn't say at the beginning, I was the founding director for Open Learn. I stood down as the Dean of the Technology faculty at the Open University to head up this initiative. I thought, this is very interesting. I don't want to be this sort of senior management, crying up the greasy pole and carrying on doing all this administrative stuff. This sounds like much more fun getting out there. Patrick McAndrew was the research director for Open Learn in those first 2 years, and he's gone on to head up some of these other projects. And Andrew Law is the director of that Open Media Unit, which took on the mainstreaming of Open Learn. So the first 2 years starting off as a project and then taking it on. There have been a number of other projects, and this is just a list of some of those things that have happened. And there's a vast greater list if you go through that link to the Open University there. And so we've been involved in a number of different projects. And it highlights at the bottom, again, something which we put in the original proposal. So the university is strongly committed to providing content in a supported electronic environment which will empower users in the interaction with that content. So that's a good part of it. Many things have happened over that time. I thought, rather than keep going with words, I threw you a few pictures. So this is what it looked like when we started. In October 2006, that appeared on the internet. A little bit later, we changed it to that. And a bit later, we changed it to that. And over the years, we then changed it to that. So you see, over the years, that the look and feel of it has changed, as it has for that sort of front page, as it is to how the content looks. Many of you may know anything about Open Learn. We use a Moodle. VLE is the background powerhouse for presenting this. So anybody familiar with Moodle will see some of the things, type structures in it, and you'll see how it has, over the years, we've changed slightly the look and feel, some of the things. We also had, as people realised from the outset, we actually launched 2 sites. So we had Open Learn, we had what we originally called Learning Space, which we just talked about being Open Learn. We also had Lab Space. Lab Space is for the community. So whereas the Learning Space and Open Learn is for the OU's content, Lab Space is for the people to do what they wanted with it. And this went through different looks and feels as well, and is now called Open Learn Works. But as it said on there, both Open Learn and Open Learn Works will probably get another refresh this year, later this year, so watch this space, they might look different again. So things are always on the go in terms of changing. But, as I said, we need to go back and say, how have we fared against those ultimate outcomes? You can see they're really rather aspirational rather than specific and outcome-driven. So you could say it's quite easy to sort of meet those, they're quite aspirational and things like that. It doesn't give deadlines to say we're going to do X by Y or whatever. It was pretty open-ended. But anyway, the three of us just did this retrospective and review of saying, against each of those outcomes, how do we think we did? So you'll see here with the colour coding, this first outcome, on the ongoing contribution to the development of supported open content and its underpinning knowledge base. Stuff in green, that's things we think, yeah, we've done that. Stuff in red at the bottom, that didn't work, that's the things. And the amber stuff in the middle, it's, yeah, we did okay on this. There's a long list of things in here, but it's also, and this is going to be important for the concluding bits as well, it's highlighting something which has already come out today, and Laura's talking about it, again, which is this issue about the content over the sort of processes and activities. So when we talked about support and open content in the original proposal, that was trying to think about that we could try to use that, say, electronic environment, the tools, and to get the users, the learners, contacting and talking to each other using things like instant messaging and video conferencing and sense-making tools. All that thing down in the red, which we all got rid of because nobody ever used the things. So got all this nice social stuff and nobody used it. They wanted the content. We can see here there's many other things which are features and things we've added. A constant theme throughout all this is the ones that think of going near this because it's university. I can't get into this stuff. It comes out of a university. So we had success there, although the bottom one, you see, where we at the Bridge to Success project, which is mentioned in the other list there, where we work with community colleges, take some of the content from Open Learn and deliver it out and adapted it out there and used it. It had initial impact, but when the funding went, it dropped off. Which just keeps reminding us that there does need to be continued activity, continued funding, however it comes about, for these things to survive. They don't just survive on their own. Just because it's a nice website and things doesn't mean that anybody will come to it and use it or continue to use it. This is the third outcome that we're looking for, ongoing contribution to the development of e-learning and the evolution of open and distance learning, online educational provision. You see, we've done very well, but we've still got some things at the bottom there which we haven't done, which is, particularly this one, compatible format for pick and mix provision of OER content. That's the thing. We're still back in this position of how do we get people to use stuff from all these different places, put it together nicely and just run with it. We've still got lots of technical, license and other issues there. We thought we would make a lot of help there with the lab space, Open Learn Works and things like that, but it's not done. But we did contribute a lot through the developments of Moodle, use of XML schemas, the alternative formats we created there. We feel we have contributed to developments in that area, in which we think that have pushed people on. And we're doing a lot on Mozilla Open Badges, and I think Petrina Law, one of her presentations here, or one of the posters, will be talking a lot more about that. You can find more about badged open courses and things, which is a very recent development, and one where certainly the badges, a more social element has been picked up quite greatly. The fourth and last these outcomes we're looking for was the ongoing contribution to the development of models of open content delivery. They can be embedded with open university systems and processes on a sustainable basis. This is about that institutional commitment and really sort of building it in there. And again, generally done pretty well. There are some areas in there which we've looked at and haven't done well. You see at the bottom, there's always this one, there's alternative income models based on direct monetization. Not got anywhere with that. Everybody thinks, where's the Holy Grail? What are we going to get the funding for? One of the big values and why the university still commits to this is that we get very high click-through rates, as it's called, from Open Learn to our online prospectus. About 8.6% in the last period. That's very high. And so we get several thousand registrations on our courses coming via Open Learn. Now, we can't always be sure that they wouldn't have come by any other means, but we do know that these things happen, and that a lot of our, as I said at the top there, a lot of our students use Open Learn for enrichment. So, so there's direct value to our students and to potential students from this as well as others. So that's one of the value propositions, which means the university's happy to keep putting some funding to keep Open Learn going. There are others, but that's obviously things. So, tales of the unexpected. So what hasn't happened, which I thought might have happened at the time, wasn't in the proposal. I think we'd still feel surprised how few universities have significant open content initiatives, as we called ours from the start. It's still a limited number. So although people are dabbling with OERs and doing things, there aren't as many institutional projects which have happened. We have seen significant engagement from non-academic organisations. I know MIT have seen that, we have seen that, I think that's others. Sometimes we can be rather insular and just think about what's trying to happen within our own academic community. But often, and you see on Open Learn Works and things, there's a number of projects and things which have happened there, which have been with non-academic organisations. I've talked about, even now, the demand from most users is for the content, for the wood, not the fire. We've been trying hard to do that. At the same time, we've had the emergence of MOOCs and those things, as you could say, social events. I mean, we have lots of free courses on Open Learn, but of course they're not, you don't start now, you can take them any time. They're not timed events. MOOCs are timed events and things like that, and they've been particularly popular. And so there is a social side to this that people want. It's just that we don't seem to have got that far, although the badged open courses are particularly doing that. And lastly, the resilience of the lab space Open Learn Work. So it's one thing to have Learning Space Open Learn, which is the Open University putting its own content out there, projecting an institutional brand and everything like that. That's fine. Lab Space Open Learn Works is always meant to be a community area, and it is still there. In some ways, the fact that the university is maintained that is quite surprising. It's not necessarily given it the due care and attention that it should have had, but it is still there, and it is being relaunched. I think one of the things I would say about that, because we've got this distinction between the learners and, say, the sort of educators, is that individual educators, not many get involved in Lab Space Open Learn Works. Where we have got that involvement, it is usually through projects or groups of people. So it's informal groups or formal groups, organisations and things which do that. And so there is that element of social and community activity, but it's by a pre-formed group and community coming in, not one that gets formed through the site itself. So, to finish off, so Open Learn at the Open University has been a major success internally to the organisation, externally to its users, in our opinion, of course. Others may differ. But internally, this is because of that philosophy that openness is integral to what the university has done. It's not an add-on. We had that initial advantage, in a sense, in doing that. But there has been adaptability work across organisational strategies and operations to adjust things and to fit in with other developments that were happening, and to sort of take under our wing other things which are happening, which adds to its value. Experimentation to try things that may not always work. So I've noticed in some of those things we included tools and old technologies and widgets and Open Learn, and it fails. Just throw them out. Don't try to persist with things that don't seem to work, or that people don't seem to want at that particular time. They may do later. And of course, there's been a lot of ongoing research and evaluation to assess what people want and how to provide it. And again, so Katrina's talking about some of that elsewhere today. And externally, in terms of the success of Open Learn, and particularly for learners, I think we'd put it down to the success is because we put learning at the heart of the user experience. It may not be ended up being that sort of social, it might be the individual learners, but they'll be able to do it learning now on their terms, with relevance, with meaning, their convenience, first for free to share. If you want to know a bit more about that, that's a blog post by Andrew that you can read, which he explains a bit more about those different elements, which he did after we found that the MOOC Lab had rated Open Learn as the best open courseware providing platform last year, or earlier this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting hearing about how open learners have evolved. We've got some time for questions. If anyone has questions? Yeah, question.
My question is how open learning works, and it's great that the universities are putting resource into updating and refreshing it. Because my experience of working with groups is that they love the idea of open learning works, but actually navigating it and trying to figure out how to use it, is not as intuitive as it could be.
Yes, that's absolutely the case. We've long recognised that it's the aspects of Moodle and also XML schemas are not things which most people are familiar with. And I suppose one of the things, it's always easy for us to forget because this is the way we do things with our registered students all the time. We have that division of responsibilities and we have professional media people, professional technical people and doing that. So if you just get an individual lecturer coming along, there are a few that can do all these things and play about with code and do these things like that, but not many can. That's why I say it's really work where there have been teams of people and you've got those different skills and things to do that. So yes, some of the redevelopment of Open Learn Works is being done through the Open Educational Practices Scotland initiative, and they've been very much looking at this issue of usability. So it's hopeful when it does get relaunched in the autumn that it will be easier to use. That's not to say it will be the easiest platform to use, because if you really want to just do something simple, then sort of wiki like Wiki Educator might be something to go for. And again, it's that contrast between simplicity and functionality, which is there's always these trade-offs. So hopefully it will be better, but we'll see.
Forward to see you at the back then. Any further questions?
Oh, Annie T.
Yeah, I is from Karlstad University in Sweden. If you could speculate, for organizations which have not the openness as their core values, do you think you can be as successful as the Open University with an open initiative? And if so, what would be the main task force?
I think the answer is yes, but that comes from finding a strategy for open education resources or open education or whatever it is that fits with the institutional ethos and mission. And so it's trying to really think through strategically what does this mean for it. So I mean MIT did it from the outset without really just thinking it was something that fitted in with their ethos and got going, and then all sorts of other things have happened. But if you look elsewhere and say somewhere like TU Delft, they've taken a very strategic look at this, particularly focusing very much in the early days on master's level type stuff about the way that this gains interaction with other people around the world, with other institutions, with institutions they're already working with around some of their programs. So it's trying to take further things that they were already engaged in, not do something totally new, but to extend it and do it further. Another example I'd always give about something fitting in with a sort of institutional ethos is Open Spires at Oxford. So Oxford University, with the Open Spires, it's all podcasts, audio and video podcasts led on the whole, not totally, but it fits in. They've always framed it in terms of it being the equivalent of the public lectures. So at Oxford, in the evenings, there are public lectures given, and any member of the public can come in and listen to, as well as Oxford University staff and students. So there's always been that element that they've done that. And they just said, oh, we're just recording some of these, either as they happen or doing some bespoke ones, and putting them out to the world and saying, you can't be here in Oxford, but here. So I think that the key to making it happen is to really think through that your institutional strategy and saying, how does this take further forward the types of things we're doing? Is it to try and promote our research more? Is it our engagement with industry? Might be the lead way in, then other things can follow. So it's trying to find where the sort of, we might call the points of least resistance are, where people say, oh yeah, I like that idea, let's do some more of that. Because I think it is this case that once you get people into talking about openness, then things will come. We're still here, there's the reluctance to that, but I think things like open access and open access publishing is getting more people aware of, say, Creative Commons licenses in the first place. Now, certainly here in the UK, where we're instructed. Now that we've got a journal article or a conference proceedings publication, we've got to have an open access version of it within 6 months of its publication. You know, that's expected, and we'll be wrapped over the knuckles if not. So once you've got people into things, oh, I've got to do this, it becomes more habit. Then when they're doing that for their research, they can think, well, I've got a Creative Commons license on my research article. What about if I did some blogging or did some other educational resources on the back of what I did for my research, which I can use for my students, but I can also promote myself and my project and my research work out there. So again, I just feel it's all part of getting people to think about, well, how does this help me do what I'm doing day to day better? Whether it's an individual or an institution.
Thank you very much. Now take one more question. Anyone has a question or anything to ask? No? Okay, well, we finished off a little bit early for tea, but that's okay. Can I just ask everyone to thank all the presenters this afternoon? It was all very interesting. Thank you very much.